This is my review of the RWBY manga, Chapter 4, which, to be clear, is different from the other RWBY manga and the RWBY anthology series. This is a completely different manga that basically retells the entire story of, or at least it will, retell the entire story of the first volume of RWBY. And I actually think it does it better. It feels like what Rooster Teeth would do if they remade Volume 1. There's better character interaction, there's better character interaction, lore is explained better. All in all, it's just a massive improvement over what we had in Volume 1. So, let's get started. So it begins with RWBY wondering if Weiss is really Weiss, because the Weiss she knew wouldn't defend her like that, which it's just a great moment between those two of them. Weiss blushes, and it really just expands on the friendship they're starting to develop here. I'm curious to see how they'll handle it when RWBY is made team leader. You all know that Weiss did not handle that decision very well, and I think here they're going to just do it even better, so I'm excited to see that as well. From there, we're given a very interesting piece of dialogue. The older a Grimm is, the bigger, smarter, and stronger it gets. This has been implied numerous times, especially in the world of Remnant on Grimm, but never laid out as direct as that, and it definitely adds a lot to the series and consideration when it comes to Grimm. Grimm can't just be left alone. They need to be completely wiped out before they get any bigger, before they get any stronger, before they get any smarter. The Elephant Grimm we saw a while back, they were old and powerful and so strong that it was said RWBY couldn't even cut through them. The Leviathan Grimm we saw at the end of Volume 6, he probably was only able to grow that big because he was out in the open water, only ever eating ships that had the misfortune of sailing within its territory, and out there was able to grow and become more and more of a threat. We also get some better motivation for why they decide to fight the giant freaking Grimms when they're only students. This always seemed like a strange choice to make, when running away definitely seemed like a viable option to them. Instead, they decided to fight the massive Grimm all on their own. But here, RWBY explains that she wants to stay behind because she couldn't forgive herself if the Grimm went on and killed another student or another person when she had the opportunity to stop it. And I think this really speaks a lot to her character, her goals for being a hunter. She wants to preserve the world's happy ending. She wants to be the hero of the storybook. And while those ideals might be seen as childish and immature, even at her young age, RWBY is willing to risk her life to make sure that she does this, that she protects people like she wants to, like her mother did. Also, can we just take a moment to appreciate the massive, massive size of this Nevermore? I mean, yes, it was big in Volume 1, and the one in Volume 6 was even bigger. This is bigger than that. This thing it's a mountain. It is a living, breathing mountain that is arguably the size of the Dragon Grimm from the end of Volume 3. It is utterly terrifying in its size. So then they all decide to go fight the Grimm. Pyrrha makes a good point that if it gets any bigger, it could end up harming the city, and John does his best to put on a brave face, though not very well, I must say. This does show a part of John's character we didn't see much in the first volume. He is determined to be a hero, even though he is so underprepared for it. We got a very interesting line from Glinda who says that these Grimm are so massive and powerful that even full-fledged huntsmen would have trouble taking them down. And Ozpin just smiles at that. I mean, this says a lot on two different sides. On one side, it shows that despite being called children again and again, there's very little difference between Team RWBY and full-fledged huntsmen. Obviously, they aren't at Crow's level, because when they were fighting Tyrion beat them all with an inch of their life, and then Crow came up and kicked his butt. But Crow is literally a secret agent, special forces, top-of-the-line huntsman. I think by the end of Volume 3, it's safe to say that they are at the level of an average huntsman. Of course, Ozpin's knowing smile. I'm curious if he let this go on simply because he wanted to see if RWBY would activate her silver eyes here and now. If he was convinced that if she was put in mortal danger, she would activate the power, and then he could start training her on how to use it properly. We still don't know his connection to the Silver Eyes, but it's clear he believes that RWBY's eyes will be of use to him. That's the first thing he says to her. He talks about her eyes. And weirdly enough, so does Oscar. But that's a topic for another day. Also, the Grimm laughs at them. The Nevermore Grimm laughs at RWBY and Yang, and that raises just so many questions for me. I think we've all always assumed the Grimm are just mindless, soulless beings of darkness who with no emotions or anything except maybe getting annoyed when they get cut up. But being able to take amusement from your enemy's pain and suffering is such a human emotion that it makes me really reconsider what exactly Grimm are and what they can be if given enough time and energy. Of course, RWBY and Yang getting so upset about the Nevermore laughing at them is absolutely hilarious, which again is another thing that I think the RWBY manga does better. It's funnier and yet still dramatic at the same time. Like I said, I think this whole thing is a vast improvement over Volume 1. We even then get a very interesting scene between Blake and Weiss, which I think is long overdue. I mean, I'm sure we'll see a lot of that next volume once they're in the capital where her people are essentially slaves, but even though Weiss doesn't know it right here, Blake has been at war with Weiss's family for almost her entire life. Weiss's father literally keeps the Faunus as slaves who he works to death in cruel, harsh conditions. And yet we get so few moments between them that's really quite sad to me. There could have been so much more conversation between these two about their respective pasts and what they've both been through, but here this is definitely an interesting moment, even though it's not the full-on breakdown between the two I was hoping for. Blake also ends up discussing how RWBY has such absolute faith in Weiss, even though they've been fighting, and that means a lot to her. It means that RWBY is such a trusting, caring individual that she really wants to believe in her. I think in a lot of ways those are traits she wanted to see in Adam, an ability to trust and care for even the people that he was at odds against, and that's something that she could just never see in him, and part of the reason why she left. Then the chapter ends with a slightly different plan than what they used in Volume 1 to take out the Nevermore. Essentially, RWBY and Yang are acting as bait so that Weiss can use her glyphs to give Blake the chance to attack. I'm not entirely sure what their overall plan is here for killing this thing. It's just so freaking massively huge. But I have always had a problem with the plan RWBY came up with in Volume 1, just that it seems so overly complicated. It was like a 12-step plan on how to take out the Nevermore, which she figured out with almost no knowledge of Weiss or Blake's fighting styles. And that's about it for Chapter 4. Like I said, I think this is a lot better than Volume 1 was, and if Rooster Teeth ever decided to remake Volume 1, I think this is a little bit closer to what they'd be looking for. So yeah, let me know what you thought of this chapter in the comments section down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and peace.